Welcome to Intellectual Medicine. Thanks for tuning in. We are going to be talking today about philosophy and medicine and how the two intertwine. And we're going to be talking about statistics and their relevance both in its relationship to perception, fundraising, and actual health outcomes. We'll talk about the decline in the cancer death rate and what that means and doesn't mean in regard to the medical cartel. We have to comment, Shan, on the lung cancer screening that just preceded us. They were talking about CAT scans for lung cancer, so we'll render an opinion. That's what we do here. We render opinions, by golly. No dogma. No dogma, just intellectual medicine.
Intellectual Medicine with Dr. Petteruti. Join Dr. Petteruti as he guides people towards living a 20 lifespan while retaining youth. He'll apply logic, reason, and scientific evidence to address conditions that drain people of their joy and vitality while protecting people from the harmful aspects of conventional medicine. Now, here's Dr. Steve Petteruti.
Good morning, everybody. It's Dr. Petteruti, and this is Intellectual Medicine. Gorgeous, cold day out there. You know, it makes us think about life and about longevity and about vitality. You know, I've wondered if people that live in warmer climates have an intrinsic health advantage to the rest of us. We're going to explore that topic a little today in something called the Blue Zones and how it relates to you. And the question I have for you is this: are you living a Blue Zone lifestyle? And if you aren't, do you want to? And can you? And how do you achieve it? And what does it mean? We need to talk, Shan, we have to talk about philosophy. I know you love discussing philosophy. But here's the thing. People talk about science as if it is the most important value that can be ascribed to any topic. The science says, fill in the blank, ergo, you should behave accordingly. Well, science is important, relevant, and incredibly valuable to the reflection on any topic. But what's more important than science? I maintain philosophy, because your science is a fact that you use to guide your philosophical thought, or more importantly, philosophy can guide science. We also need to talk about the corruption of science, its manipulation by the corporate and the medical cartel in a way that amplifies profit, income, but does not necessarily benefit the individual. Now, I'm not implying that corporations and the medical cartel are evil and manipulative and are exacting to do you harm. It would be more accurate to say that large swaths of this entity is just indifferent. They just really are not thoughtful about the way their actions affect individuals because their concern is for the corporate or the bureaucratic entity. So this is why Coca-Cola is involved in China's obesity policy, and it is why they have extended tentacles into the debate on obesity in a way to protect their corporate interests. This is the reason why your health insurance does not insure your health. The benefit to you staying healthy is to you individually. Think of all the corporate entities that are purported to support your health, hospitals, even to a certain extent, doctors, especially those that are subspecialty related and have a lot of procedural activity. Think cancer surgeons, think cardiovascular surgeons. They don't get to execute their trade unless illness welcomes you to their door. It's not that they're rooting for illness, folks. You got to understand this nuance. It's that they are not motivated in their daily routine to aspire to your greatest health. Quite frankly, they're too busy stamping out disease. So to look to them as a source of that information is to bark up the wrong tree. So you have then the insurance companies. Now we have patients and relationships with people that are executives there. Their focus is on their financial well-being first and foremost. Any corporation that does not focus on their financial health will suffer a negative consequence, and the same is true for hospitals, for health insurance entities. What about your health? How then do you get that information? People want to know what matters, because you only have so much time, money, and energy. We talk about this all the time in philosophy. How do you apply it? So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the cancer death rate, what it means and what it doesn't mean. And we're going to talk about blue zones. Tyler, have you ever heard of a blue zone? Great. All right. Well, you're going to learn about it today, bro. That's what I'm here. You mean you're not here to support the show and your astute ability as a producer? You mostly just want to listen to us talk, right? Awesome. Well, Shannon, you'll like the blue zone concept here. I think that you made that plane out of Rhode Island here.
I just want the warm one. Where is the warmest one?
The warmest blue zone. It's probably Costa Rica.
All right, there we go.
The Nicoya Peninsula.
There we go.
Was one of the 5 blue zones. So this is, and we'll talk about that. But first of all, I want to thank my faithful listeners who've been calling in to give us a heads up, Shan. They called last week. One was concerned because, as my regular listeners know, we advocate for the use of complementary support in disease states such as cancer, including the intravenous use of vitamin C to support health, including its use based upon studies that have shown its effect against cancer cells. This is a forming science. My forthcoming paper on the topic, to be published, will make available to the public at large as well, on its proposed role in helping to prevent cancer relapse. This is a theoretical construct that we are pioneering and pushing amongst other doctors in this field. Here's what we're up against, people: the cartel. Nobody in mainstream medicine, I should say very few, are interested in this topic. There ain't no money to be had. Vitamin C is cheap, generic, a natural substance. There's nobody that's going to be building an edifice on top of vitamin C. Profit margins aren't there. It's not coming to a theater near you unless we can provide it. And we'll continue to talk about it because of the science that compels us to do that. Now, we had a caller, Shannon, last week, and her concern for us was that there's been cancer doctors that have been advocating complementary cancer care mysteriously dying through single car accidents, through unexpected suicides, through weird stuff. I'm not much of a conspiracy theorist, and it may well be that these are pure coincidences, but I really care about the fact that people are concerned for us. So will there be, or could there be, a negative consequence to us speaking our truth and talking about these topics? The answer is, of course. Nothing changes, folks, without effort, and no power entity lets loose its grip without fighting back. And there are fewer power entities more monopolistic than the evolving and consolidating healthcare cartel. Doctors are not evil people. Healthcare is not a malicious entity, but it is one that is sucking all the oxygen out of the room when you look how it's becoming monopolistically vertically integrated. Once upon a time, doctors were free agents, working for patients, not beholden to any corporate entity. They were private practitioners. That good old day. Now, majority of them are taking a paycheck from the corporation, and they cannot defy corporate will lest they be fired. Now, you want to get at somebody, you get at their paycheck. You don't need to put a bullet in their head. You just need to take their livelihood away. So that's the real risk. Doctors who stand out from the crowd risk censure. But we will continue to stand out because, I don't know, it's just what we do. It's just what we believe in. It's not cavalier. It's because the science drives us toward this objective. I'll tell you the origins of intellectual medicine, and I'm going to tell you, people, the Power 9, the 9 things that people who live to be 100, which they commonly do in these blue zones, have in common. So you can apply them to your life. We're going to talk about the connection between obesity and shrinking brains, and we got to talk about that cancer death report. It's really important. But first, we take a brief break. This is Dr. Petteruti on Intellectual Medicine. You're listening to WPRO, the voice of Southern New England.
Before you go, during the commercial, you had that Michael Klein interview for you. Can you text me your email address?
I'll do that after. I'll do that after the show, and we'll talk about a future date.
Now she refuses to travel by car.
So that was it was so sweet. This woman called up and she was worried for us because she said, 88 doctors have been killed who are advocating for the types of things you're talking about, Dr. Petteruti, and
But on this trip, she went by plane.
was moved by that. It was thoughtful. I really don't believe that there's a hitman after us in the sense that they'll kill us, but there are corporate interests that are not pleased with the things we espouse. And there are orthodox interests that are not pleased with the things that we advocate. It comes down to this, folks, and that is freedom of speech and the freedom to pursue your own philosophical approach to life. So cancer death rates are relevant. I mean, nobody wants to die of cancer, but think about it from this perspective. If death rates from cancer go down, what death rates do we want to go up? I know that's a weird question, but we all have to die of something. And if everybody dies, and if the death rate from one entity goes down, then it's got to be replaced by something else. Now, I'm not lobbying that we die for any particular cause, but it bears reflecting upon. And here's another question when it comes to the cancer death rates, and we'll talk about this more on air. If you have cancer, and in the course of being treated for it, you develop side effect from the drug that causes heart failure, and you die from heart failure, does that get labeled as heart failure or cancer death? The answer is it gets labeled as a heart failure death with cancer being secondary. So when they're looking at these death statistics, sometimes the consequence of treating cancer gets lost in the sauce. If you have surgery to remove a lung tumor, and 2 months later you die from an overwhelming infection, not necessarily from the cancer, how does that get labeled? Because all these statistical studies are using death certificates to analyze them. Not only that, but you have to look at not only the decline in the cancer death rate, but the decline in the incidence rate, 10 seconds. All right, here we go. We'll talk about this in a moment. Let's talk about blue zones first, Sharon. Do that.
Sure.
Have you heard about blue zone?
Yes, I have.
You have? You have.
Intellectual medicine with Dr. Petteruti. Call in now at 438-WPRO or 1-800-321-WPRO.
Hey gang, we're back. It's Dr. Petteruti along with Shannon and Tyler behind the glass, having a ball in the morning, teaching you, guiding you, talking to you about philosophy, how to live, how do you want to live, and what elements do you want to bring to your life. Well, I like this blue zone concept, Shannon, because it occurs to me, Orthodox medicine likes to focus on disease states, right? Let's look for disease and let's look how we can react to it. Well, Gary Buettner from National Geographic began studying extraordinary longevity. People that live a real long time. And he identified 5 places in the world where people frequently live to 100 and beyond. Now, not only do they live to 100 and beyond, but they are in vital good health. Let me tell you a little story that highlights this. So this was a doctor. He's 96 years old, and he got an estimate. He's in one of the blue zones. He got an estimate to put a fence in his backyard for $6,000. He said, "That's too much money. I'll do it myself." He put the fence in. Shannon, did you know a week later he was in the hospital?
Really?
Yeah. Performing surgery on a patient of his.
That's right.
Right. At 96 people. So I had this conversation with one of those retirement type people. Very, very depressing. I don't know, retirement's a beautiful concept. The idea that, but here's the depressing part, right? Well, doctor, you need to have $8 trillion so you can retire and still be able to pay for groceries. It's kind of depressing. And then he said to me, well, how long do you plan on practicing medicine? I said, I don't know, another 30 years.
Well, if that guy can do it, right?
Why not?
Right.
This is fun. What else am I going to do? If you see me play golf, you will wish I would continue practicing medicine. You'll be safe on the course. So blue zones, there are 5 of them that were identified. One is in Loma Linda, California. Another in the Nicoya Peninsula of Costa Rica. Sardinia, an island off the coast of Italy. Ikaria in Greece. And Okinawa in Japan. 5 of them. Now this correlates, you may be wondering, well, are they just genetically endowed? There was a Danish twin study, a very famous one that was done to look at longevity, and they concluded, based upon twins separated at birth, that longevity was 80% lifestyle. Health and longevity had much less to do with genetics than with what we do in our daily routine. So what are the Power Nine? Number one, move. They all had intrinsic physical activity built into their life. They walked a lot, they moved a lot. They didn't necessarily go to a gym. Number two, have a life purpose. They had a reason to get out of bed every morning, something that fired them, whether it was an occupation, a hobby, some endeavor that motivated their raison d'existence, their reason for living. And number three, I call this a happy hour. Quite literally, it's happy hour. It's a stress break in the middle of the day. Some people had meditation. Some people had prayerful interludes. Some people took a siesta. Some cultures have happy hour. Not drunken, slovenly intoxication. I'm talking about happy hour. Another one was the 80% rule. In Okinawa, it's a Confucius-based principle of eating to 80% of your satisfaction, leaving the table not bloated, not gorged. The fifth one was food selection. It turns out that they have a common denominator with what they eat and what they don't eat. They eat a lot of soy, lentils, beans, nuts, and seeds. They do not eat much meat. On average, 5 times per month, and on average about 4 ounces of meat. So it's fish, nuts, beans as their primary sustenance. The sixth one, I love this one, Shan. They all drink wine, except for in Loma Linda, they're Seventh-day Adventists. They drink wine, but the volume was rather specific. It's no more than 2 glasses per day.
Seems like a lot.
2 glasses per day.
Every day?
Yeah, every day.
Every day.
Happy hour.
Happy hour, hey.
Yeah, every day.
Right?
I mean, what's killing people, right? It's a stress thing. You know, in America, we go 82 million miles an hour, and then we stop and we drink, shots of tequila. What the hell's going on? We don't have sort of a. So I'll tell you, this is a little sidebar. We once had a exchange student at our house from Italy, and I remember she was horrified that in America we had cup holders in our cars. She said, "What is that?" Then in Italy, we drink coffee in a cafe. We get out of our car, we sit, we talk to each other, and we sip coffee. You don't drive 90 miles an hour with a coffee cup spilling in your lap on your way to work so you can work 10 hours a day so you could sprint home, right? What are we doing? Nowhere in the world do people work as long, as hard, or as productive as we are in America. It's a beautiful thing, but we pay a price. Maybe we should be rethinking how we measure national health instead of gross domestic product. Anyhow, back to the Power Nine. Are you keeping lists, people? Number 7 is they were all members of faith communities. Now, it didn't matter which denomination. What mattered was that they were connected to a group based around their faith belief. In America, many people choose not to attend a denominational pursuit. One might then transplant that into a philosophically connected cohort. A group that you're a member of seems really important. And the eighth PowerPoint was extended family connection. The people all had a tendency to have generational connections within their families. Once again, America lives differently. Generational families are a beautiful thing, but not inevitable. And I believe can be replaced with constructed extended networks of family as we define it. The 9th one I thought was pretty cool, Shannon. It was a tribe. They all had cluster tribes, little groups of people with similar philosophy that hung out together. And the philosophy was rather specific. They were groups of people who reinforce positive health philosophy. So a tribe could be a bunch of guys bowling and drinking beer and smoking cigars. That would be a tribe, but not necessarily one of the Power Nine. They are tribes, for instance, in Okinawa, there was one tribe of people got together every day for 90 years. They would get together and have tea. And if somebody didn't show up, they would all go to that person's house to check in on them. So think about this. Now, here's where I depart company with the author. They talk about something called the life radius. For most people, 90% of your life is lived within a 5-mile radius of where you live. The life radius contains the forced elements of your activity: shopping, socializing, even attending churches, walking and moving. If you look at the grid of America, these life radii, these 5-mile areas, are not made for humans. They are built for cars, for industry, for trucks. You know, I know because every now and then I ride my bike to work, you know, Shan, and I'm thinking, this is great for my health. Yeah, until I splat on somebody's windshield, it's dangerous. So we think about, now, Buettner's recommendation is that we have to have governmental reorganization of the grid so that it fosters good health. Really? We're having trouble filling up potholes, people. This is not going to happen in our lifetime. However, you can build your blue zone over your head by applying these principles in real life. And I would maintain that there are things that the blue zone people are missing, right? What they're missing are hormones. What they're missing are advanced anti-aging support for preventing muscle wasting, for supporting facial youth and vitality. And we talk a lot about living longer. That's really valuable to those of us who pursue it. What's more important is living with vitality and living with a youthful attitude and body, you know, body and face. Studies have correlated facial appearance with mood and with happiness and with decreased depression. So when should you start doing some of these anti-aging things? First, the Power 9, that's your prerogative, right? So philosophy, I said, drives everything. I had a patient whose father had a heart attack, and he came home from his heart attack, and he was smoking cigars, eating steaks, and drinking bourbon. And the son was apoplectic. He said, how can he do that? Doesn't he know that's bad for his health? I said, you know, how does he define health? He's telling you by his actions, he's defining health as having the freedom to enjoy cigars, steaks, and bourbon. And if he dies of a heart attack, he'll likely be at peace with that. I'm not advocating that lifestyle. I choose not to pursue it myself. But it's really critical that we allow freedom of choice and that we therefore allow individuals to define health for themselves. I don't want health to be imposed on me by the state, by my doctor. I don't want it to be imposed on me by a lack of choices. And we talk about freedom a lot here because we value it immensely. Your freedom can be stripped from you by direct legislative intervention. You are not allowed to do fill in the blank, or by monopolistic elimination of alternatives. We all remember when there was one phone company. Remember Ma Bell? Well, we all don't. Tyler doesn't, but I do. Shannon, you probably don't. We can all remember. I can remember those. Remember people, those long distance calls? You like wait till 11 p.m. and get off the phone fast because the rate was going nuts. You show me a monopoly, and I'll show you price gouging and bad service. Now, put it down to a medical, vertically integrated monopolistic cartel. If you choke off alternative, or I should say complementary options for your healthcare, things like intellectual medicine, if you choke off intellectual medicine and other like entities, you have the freedom to choose 1,000 entities that are all the same. Now, I'm not saying that we're the end all of healthcare, but that we're an important voice against not against, but as an alternative to the mainstream. So we have to talk about cancer death rates, and we do want to talk about lung cancer screening. You know, we heard about that on the way in. There's a CAT scan recommendation for people who smoked. We're going to render our opinion on that. And new information about hormones and blood clots. It turns out that the way you take hormones matters a lot. Pills cause blood clots. Non-pill approaches do not. That's the study summary. We'll talk about that in detail and why it supports our philosophy of take hormones or else. But first, from the Revolution Softwash News Center, it's Doug Lizette. Good morning, Doug.
So Joe had asked a question, it's lost now, but I'll kind of summarize,
Yeah.
about menopause. So, friend, the hot flashes, the weight gain, what do they do? You got someone late 40s.
Right. Well, the question on the table is, what about menopause, hot flashes, and weight gain? Well, that's easy. Get on hormones. The sooner the better. If you're not sure about whether or not to start hormones, it's better to start them earlier than later. Here's what we know about menopause. By the time a woman's menstruation stops, that is, she ceases bleeding, classically, menopause is defined as 1 year without a period. By the time that happens, they've lost 20 to 30% of their bone density. without them knowing it, it's gone. They have already been in a perimenopausal state for up to 10 years with dropping testosterone, progesterone, and estrogen levels. Often this is accompanied with mental health changes, everything from depression to increase in anxiety. It turns out that the hormones are super critical to brain function. And without a replete amount of hormones in your system, some, not all, but some people are profoundly sensitive to that. There's even been a correlation between late life schizophrenia and hormonal depletion. So I see all the time correlations of women and men, but more women, anxiety disorder. You ask them, when did you start your antidepressant? Answer, when I was in my mid-40s. Classic correlation of dropping hormone. There's also a connection between hot flashes and subsequent breast cancer. It appears that women who suffer more in the perimenopause have a greater propensity to develop breast cancer later. Replace your hormones. There's no good evidence that it'll increase cancer risk. Those studies from the 1990s don't show that correlation. In fact, the breast cancer incidence rate, I may amplify this, but from 2006 to 2015, the rate of breast cancer has gone up. Now, why is that relevant to our conversation about hormones? The Women's Health Initiative came out in the 1990s. That's when all the doctors abandoned hormones. Given that fact, if hormone replacement therapy was causing breast cancer, the rate should be going down, and it's not. Why not? Because they blame the wrong thing. And it scared women away from hormones, and the vast majority of doctors are just repeating the dogma that hormones equal cancer risk. They don't. Now, we'll talk about the blood clot risk factor when we come back on air, so stay with us for that. But the things that are commonly done by orthodox medicine for hot flashes, they'll put you on drugs like antidepressants. Horrible idea, right? Fat gaining, blunting sex drive, fogging the brain, not worth doing. So that's the question, and that's the answer to the question. And I would even venture to say, I would not venture to say, we believe and advocate that even if you don't have any symptoms, you should be on hormones at some point in your life for its youth-preserving and possibly life-extending benefit. Sarcopenia is a cause of infirmity. What does that mean? Loss of bone density, loss of muscle mass, and with that, fading brain power, mood. I had a woman in recently, she's in her mid-70s, early 70s. We know, always, when patients come to me, we check their height, their weight, percent body fat. She's lost 5 inches of vertical height. She said, oh my goodness, I used to be 5 inches taller. That's scary, people. You watch somebody get out of a chair and you can predict their likely mortality in the next 3 years. If you can't hop out of a chair without assistance, you got a problem. The power is not there to generate proper movement, which is a cornerstone of health maintenance. So please get on your hormones. There's no age too late. No age too late. It's not uncommon for us to start men and women in their 80s on hormone support therapy. Build muscle. I know, that's annoying, huh? Commercials, what can I do? I don't know, someday, Shannon. Have we got a sponsor yet?
No.
Are you working on that?
Yeah.
What are we going to do? Who can sponsor us?
Right.
We'll sell out. Coca-Cola, call them up. Tell them we'll talk nice about them if they give us a check. So like in China, maybe we'll talk about that. The Coke-China connection was fascinating. Coca-Cola has a not-for-profit entity. Oh, got a 1 minute. 1 minute, I got to get my game face on. Feel free to text into Shannon if you have any things you want to broach, topics that you want us to weave in.
I have a question for the next
break or on air?
Next break.
Okay, next break, another question coming. We do have one more break. You can also text Shannon between shows and say, hey, talk about this next week. You guys are VIPs to us all.
Freeway car wash, that is, with locations in the Olneyville section of Providence, on Dexter Street in Pawtucket, and on Newport Avenue and Pawtucket Avenue in East Providence. You're never far from a clean car, outside and inside. Go to freewaycarwash.com for great deals and details about the Unlimited Wash Club. Hit the freeway today. You'll be glad you did.
Now, back to Intellectual Medicine with Dr. Petteruti. Call in now at 438-WPRO or 1-800-323-3776. 821-WPRO.
Dr. Petteruti, Intellectual Medicine, we are back, and we're talking about the cancer death rate and its decline. We'll get to that in a moment. But I want to highlight there was an op-ed piece in the Journal Bulletin. By the way, if you don't subscribe to the Journal Bulletin, go ahead and sign up, even if you don't read it. I don't care if you throw it away. Here's the thing. Tyler, how would you feel if we did not have a newspaper in the state of Rhode Island? No newspaper. All right? You see, and from a young man who gets most of your news consumption online. Am I right? Right, WPRO. So keep listening to the station and keep supporting it. And subscribe to the Journal Bulletin. And here's why. As good as the internet is, you got to have independent reporting out there, folks. And think of the Journal Bulletin not as a corporate entity, but almost like NPR, only different, right? They need financial support. And look, I'm not saying they're a perfect entity, and certainly, look, I've gotten annoyed at articles they've written and their limited scope. But by golly, I'd hate to wake up in a world without free journalism, investigative journalism, and reporting. And I would not want to wake up in a state without WPRO. It gives us this freedom format to talk about things like cancer death rates and CAT scanning for lung cancers, and to give you guys another perspective. So I said philosophy drives the train. The cancer death rate went down. Pause, think. That's what intellectual medicine asks you to do, by the way. You actually have to think. You can't just absorb dogma. So if the cancer death rate went down, then what do you want to die from? Now, I'm not advocating that we die for cancer, but we all got to die. So this is a question that is rarely posed, Shannon. What death rate do we want to see go up? When I was in medical school, I had a classmate of mine, and he was eating a burger, and he's putting salt on it, and he's putting bacon and cheese on it. And I looked at him, I said, dude, what are you doing? I said, that's bad for your heart health. He goes, no, man, this is my cancer prevention diet. I said, what are you talking about? He said, I'm dying of a heart attack. Screw that. He said, so my point is not to advocate for death by heart attack, but to advocate for looking beyond the numbers. So death rate goes down 27% from 1999 to 2016. The American Cancer Society makes this announcement. They make these announcements periodically, I believe in part, to help fundraising. You want to pump money into the current pursuit? We're winning the war. We're winning the war. We need more money, more money, more money. Now listen, there are a few doctors out there more empathic, thoughtful, and loving than oncologists, primary care doctors, surgeons, and those involved with the treatment of cancer. However, they are so overwhelmed by the cartel's dogmatic information that it is really hard to break free. You look at those journals, people, look at who's advertising in the cancer journals and the medical journals. It's not the producers of vitamin C, okay? It is pharmaceutical companies, it is hospital entities, it is all of the indifferent cartel aspects of healthcare that are reaping billions and billions of dollars off of our illness. You know, the Nicoya Peninsula in Costa Rica, yeah, they don't have this cancer screening down there. They don't, you know what they spend on healthcare is less than 15% of what we spend. And they're living to be 100 years old. We don't need to be drugged, cut, and radiated to be healthy people. So let's go back to the cancer death rate. Now here's a detail that you have to read the article to actually appreciate. The death rate went down 1.8% in men. But back up a little bit. The incidence rate, the rate of new cancers being diagnosed, actually went down in men by 2%. Now, draw those lines parallel to one another, Shannon. If the rate of if the best way not to die from cancer is not to get cancer. So if the incidence rate of cancer went down, it stands to reason by logical extension the death rate's going to go down. It's not as if the cancer cartel can lay claim to benefit here. The death rate from liver cancer is going up. The death rate from breast cancer from 2006 to 2015, the incidence rate, that's the rate of new cancer formation for breast cancer from 06 to 2015 has gone up. So what's the common denominators? Let's go back to the causes, right? To the formative elements of this. They found that the death rate from cancer going down is primarily fewer people smoking cigarettes. It's an environmental connection. It's not because we have discovered a brilliant treatment that makes everybody better. It's because we are stopping it at its root in some cases. So look at your kids that are juuling. Look at the nicotine addiction that's evolving in the young people. What are we doing, folks? Look at the current cause of obesity, which is obesity-related cancers. If you are a non-smoker and your body mass index is above 30 or your percent body fat is elevated, that becomes your number one potential contributor to cancer. Address that. It's not smoking, it's environmental as well. How about radon gas? How about putting in more fossil fuel burning power plants? Have we figured out yet that burning oil is bad, that burning natural gas is bad, that it is a compromise we made during the evolution of the industrial era that we no longer need to make? Building another power plant that burns fossil fuel is a great idea if this is 1930. You don't build it and you will see other forms evolve that are going to help fuel the energy of the country without causing cancer, death, lung disease, and other maladies. So we've got to be careful of these sources, and we can't celebrate that which doesn't deserve to have the cork popped on it. The death rate going down has more to do with environmental variables. We talk on this show about heavy metal. Why? It's critically important and nobody else talks about it. Lead correlates with brain rotting. It increases the risk of heart disease. Cadmium and other heavy metals correlate with increased risk of cancer. The things that are more likely to cause cancer are the things nearest to you. Think about what's inside your body, how you eat, how you live, and also this exposure to heavy metals that needs to be analyzed, not through blood, but through urine testing. We have to be careful of the sources. So are we happy the cancer death rate is going down? It's no big deal. You know, the incidence rate's going down. That's what matters. So let's talk the lung CAT scanning. We had on the show earlier today, Rhode Island Medical Imaging, a really fine imaging institution. But make no mistake about it, people. Imaging in medicine in America is a multi-billion-dollar business. It is part of the cartel. We are over-imaged. We CAT scan, X-ray, and MRI everything into oblivion. A CAT scan, an MRI, a mammogram has never prevented any disease ever. Go back to the root. Furthermore, radiation is a cancer risk factor. You're going to irradiate your lungs looking for lung cancer. What's it going to do to your lifetime risk of lymphomas or other forms of cancer? Hey, we don't know, but let's do the radiation anyhow. How is it going to prevent cancer? It's not. You're going to be chasing shadows. I'm not a huge proponent, as you can tell, of the CAT scanning looking for lung cancer. Why not? Well, let's go back to its origins. Would you rather spend $1,000, $500, or whatever it costs for a CAT scan that has nothing to do with preventing cancer? Or would you rather quit smoking and pay that money in a medical weight loss program to help weight reduction? I maintain address the root causes, get heavy metal tested, and go after that. So how can we trust what's going on with regard to weight loss? We're going to talk about how Coca-Cola has infiltrated the conversation on obesity and how they wrote national policy for China and how they infiltrated the thought and the language of obesity in America. And I believe that pattern has something to do with why obesity is being ignored. But first, do we have time? We got to take a break? We got to take a break. Then I'll tell you about hormones and blood clots and why hormones are good for you and how to avoid getting clots when you take them. I'm Dr. Steve Petteruti. This is Intellectual Medicine on WPRO, the voice of Southern New England.
Okay, that's funny because that's one of the questions.
Which was?
About the blood clots.
Oh, right. So,
do you want to address it?
When we come back?
Come back.
Yeah, we'll do that when we come back so the wider audience can hear it. When it comes to this whole hormone replacement concept, I just don't understand the fear and loathing, right? Let's draw an analogy here. Your thyroid is a gland. It makes a hormone. When that hormone declines and the gland ceases to function, you suffer a negative consequence called hypothyroidism. No doctor on the planet would hesitate to replace your thyroid hormone in the face of its decline when you're suffering, right? Let's draw an analogy between that and your gonads, ovaries in women, testicles in men. It's a gland. It produces hormones. When those hormones decline, you suffer. Follow the bouncing ball here, people. There's no difference other than biased perception that that's always the way it's been, that men and women should have their hormones decline. That's considered normal.
This is actually interesting. So this goes a lot further. So 7 years ago, diagnosed with Hashimoto's, and her doc put her on and off Levo. Like when her numbers get better, they take her off, and she's not feeling well, and they put her back on.
Right.
So she's saying, I've been told that once I start treatment that I should stay on thyroid and not come off.
Right.
Kind of what's your...
Oh, it's a fascinating question on the table. Was patient with Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Hashimoto's is an autoimmune process where your body attacks the gland and has it cease functioning. That accounts for 90% of low thyroid states. In some uncommon cases, Hashimoto's can be transient, it can be temporary. And when you address the inflammatory autoimmune aspects of that disease through gut health, etc., it can reverse. That's relatively uncommon. More commonly, when it starts to degrade your thyroid, that process continues. Now, the patient in question said that her doctor kept taking her on and off the thyroid support based upon the lab work and the blood work. That's nonsense. The thing that drives treatment decisions is not the blood work, it's the symptoms. Somebody can have fatigue, dry skin, constipation, hair thinning, brain fog, loss of energy, and can have normal thyroid blood testing, yet still have what we call functional hypothyroidism. That means the thyroid's not producing at a level necessary for your best health. This goes to the heart of functional and intellectual medicine. We don't chase labs, we treat patients. When I was in medical school, I was taught, don't treat the lab, treat the patient. I've had many patients come in, their symptoms are screaming hypothyroid. The doctor does a blood test and says, but the blood says you're normal, so we're not going to treat you. Well, doctor, what about my symptoms? I don't know, but you're not hypothyroid because a blood test says you're not. That's nonsense. The blood test does not dictate the diagnosis. The problem, and it goes down to statistics, when you can't measure what's important, like patient vitality, you give importance to what you can measure, like thyroid lab studies. Because in orthodox medicine, the insurance company and the state are watching those lab interpretations. And I've had colleagues of mine get reprimanded by their Department of Health for treating patients who didn't have lab evidence of low thyroid, despite their symptomatic response in a favorable manner. I've had colleagues of mine kicked out of insurance companies for the same reason. So, to have your thyroid or your symptoms addressed differently, sometimes you got to step out of the mainstream and go to a different type of doc.
To get this free report, go to bankonyourself.com. That's bankonyourself.com. Bankonyourself.com. Now, back to intellectual medicine with Dr. Petteruti. Call in now at 4
Gonna have like 10 minutes.
Okay.
or 1-800-321-WPRO.
So we are back. It's Dr. Petteruti. This is Intellectual Medicine. Shannon, do me a favor. When we leave here today, no, we'll have Tyler do this because I kind of love you. I don't want this to happen. Tyler, do you mind going down and starting my car for me before we leave? Well, who's going to do the show if my car blows up?
Oh.
That's what I'm saying. The cartel, right? Right now, who knows? They could be wiring my engine. You know, you make a good point, Tyler, right? Because you're a young guy. Well, no, but if the car blows up and you die, you're going to lose like 90 years of lifespan. What we need is some like old dude about to die to go start the cars, right? I don't know. I hate to say it, but I'm the oldest guy in the room, so maybe I should just go start my own damn car, right? Oh boy, look, we don't mean to make light of it. The assault on intellectual medicine and on complementary care is widespread. It is woven into the fabric of the state, who is in partnership with elements of the medical cartel. Not all of it. We're talking about the power brokers in medicine. The insurance company, the hospitals, and the state have an unholy alliance where they're seeking to, in our view, in our opinion, and based upon our experience with colleagues throughout the country and conversations with them, they get a disproportionate amount of negative scrutiny for the philosophies that they espouse. So we talked, if you heard the show last week, you had the benefit of listening to Chris Donatelli, a very enlightened, intelligent woman who is crafting her fight against breast cancer based on her philosophy. Now they can go back and view that, can't they, Shannon?
They can, yeah.
How do they do that?
It's on Facebook and it's on our YouTube channel.
So people tune into our Facebook. How do they log on and follow us on those worlds like Instagram and such? How do they do that?
You just search our name, Intellectual Medicine.
So our name's Intellectual Medicine.
Pops right up.
And it pops up and they can follow. Here's why you want to do that. In case the car blows up, you'll know it because we'll tell you through that vehicle. Shannon will.
I will.
Thank you, Shannon.
I will.
And you know, I want a big Cavoni statue.
I'm sure you do.
In the
With
cemetery.
a fountain. It's got to have a fountain,
With a
right?
fountain. Sorry, people. It's just part of my DNA, right? So, China invading Coca-Cola invading the conversation on obesity, right? Talk about the fox guarding the hen house. It turns out, in fact, Coca-Cola established, according to the New York Times, a International Life Science Institute, Shannon. This was a not-for-profit entity who's charged with helping lifestyle enhancement. Now, if you're Coca-Cola, you don't want people thinking that drinking a sugar-laden product is bad for your health, nor that it's a contributor to obesity, because the rate of Coca-Cola drinking would go down. So they then went to China, a huge emerging market, and they started to help China through this not-for-profit entity, draft guidelines for obesity prevention. And the guidelines revolved around 10 minutes per day of physical activity. Their focus was not dietary at all. Now, we know through our science and research, and yes, ladies and gentlemen, I am board certified in obesity treatment. Like other colleagues in the state, we are physicians and individuals that have made it our business to do extra study to become knowledgeable about how to treat obesity, like the medical and metabolic disorder that it is, not the character flaw that people want you to think it is. Obesity, like diabetes, if not properly treated, cannot be resolved. Must be addressed through a medical approach for the majority of people that are fighting that condition. All right. So what happens? We know that exercise has little to nothing to do with weight loss. Little to nothing. You cannot go to the gym and lose significant weight. Period. End of story. The studies to back that up are overwhelming. Overwhelming. And really, the thermodynamics support that. You know, you go on that treadmill for 30 minutes, you burn 300 calories and spit in the ocean. You have one donut, you're back up to where you were. So diet is a central element of that. Coca-Cola didn't want people to know that, so they buried it by this other marketing language that still permeates the conversation. Now we're talking about science. Now we're also talking about the corruption of science, the way that it gets bought out by corporate entities. I could tell you they will create studies already knowing the outcome. And by they, I'm talking about not-for-profit subsidiaries of pharmaceutical companies and special interest groups that channel money through that funnel, that then make grants available to researchers who will not tell them exactly what they want them to do, but rather guide the structure of the study to get the outcome they want. Mm-hmm. And you know what happens if the study comes out bad? So if this International Life Science Institute sponsored a study on drinking Coca-Cola and obesity and it came out bad, they just don't publish it. Because the sponsoring entity usually, often, controls the money and the rights to the results of the study. So I'm not indicting all research, but I certainly am asking you to look beyond that headline. That's that old adage, when you can't measure what's important, you give importance to what you can measure. Cancer death rates are relevant, but life vitality rates are more important. Where's the measurement for life vitality? It's not there. It has to be self-defined. I'm not advocating that it should be an either or proposition. You should have both. But we know from our own experience, observation, and research that patients who suffer cancer oftentimes suffer as much, if not more, from the treatment of it than the disease itself. And that we are not doing enough to support patients that are in that fight. We're not doing enough to prevent cancer from coming back after it's been beaten down. We're not doing enough to restore human vitality. This is an arena of innovation. It's begging for innovation, and that we are helping to provide, and we will continue to do that along with like-minded colleagues throughout the country, throughout the state. We're not alone in this conversation. We got to have some oncology people on, Shan, because you know what? We want to partner and lock arms with the most progressive thoughts in that field. And the most progressive thoughts in any field are open-minded and are willing to accept what is a limit of their knowledge. When an oncologist says to a patient, well, I don't know much about vitamin C, but I think it's a reasonable thing to contemplate. That's an enlightened perspective. When they say, oh my God, don't do that, bad for you, that is an opinion steeped in ignorance because they just haven't spent the time. Maybe they don't have the time, that's okay. Then send them to somebody who knows. So we got a couple minutes. Hormones and clots, all right? So one of the knocks on hormone replacement therapy is that it would increase the risk of blood clots, and this is known to be true. But a new study helps to focus that and reinforces our opinion in intellectual medicine. There was an increase in blood clotting only if you take your hormones by mouth, specifically estrogens, and you never take estrogen or testosterone by mouth. In our opinion, that's a horrible way to receive your hormones. Why? Because it goes through the liver first, and it is pro-blood clot forming. You are better off doing it either topically as a cream or as a bioidentical, that means a molecular form that is identical to what your body makes, implanted as we do at Intellectual Medicine as a pellet. That approach has been shown not to increase blood clotting rate as evidenced by this recent study. So there's another myth that bites the dust. No increased risk of cancer in the evidence with regard to bioidentical hormones or variable risks. Only individuals can weigh these risks and benefits, and you really need time. You need time to be able to reflect on it. At Intellectual Medicine, that's one of the commodities we can dispense. Dr. Fine was on earlier talking about access to primary care. It doesn't exist anymore. They're killing primary care. They're jamming it full of too many mandates. They only have 5 minutes to talk to you, the poor things. Look, it's hard to live in that world if you've got a very nuanced conversation that you want to have. That requires a commodity of time, and really it requires your own research effort. And keep tuning into us because we're partners with you guys. We like having this conversation, and we love it when you text and call us with questions, messages, and encouragement. We're always open to that. We're always open as well to Tony DeJesus and the Big Blue Bug, one of our favorite voices on the radio. He'll be coming up next. In the meantime, I'm Dr. Steve Petteruti along with Shannon. We're wishing you guys 120 enough. Should we go beyond that?
Let's stick to that right now. I think it's good.
I want more. All right, 120 youthful years, folks. Go Patriots. 24-21 Patriots win. I'm Dr. Petteruti. See you next week. Yeah, a Patriots win, Joe. It's going to happen.
He asked.
That's right. I'll see you guys next week. Thanks for